All right. Welcome everyone to this month's event of I Have Been Wondering. Today with the fantastic, with the amazing, with the one and only Kai Cheng Thom. My heart is flying all the way from Vancouver to Toronto. People are clapping across the country. So freaking amazing to have Kai today with me. And I Have Been Wondering is a series, it's a monthly series that is run by yours truly, Danny Ramadan, Syrian Canadian author and YouTube and Instagram influencer. And I do this event from my office right here. You can see my office here in Vancouver, where I meet fantastic folks from the writing community who identify within a marginalized identity, such as folks who identify within the minorities of sexual orientations or racial identities or the interactions of any of those identities. Before we start, I would like to acknowledge that today I'm broadcasting to you from the Coast Salish territories, the unceded territories of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and the Musqueam people. I have been reading Billy Ray Bilcourt's book, A History of My Brief Body. And honestly, I just read the first essay because I bought the book yesterday, which is sad of me. I'm late to the game. And in the essay, he says that storytelling about his identity as an Indigenous person can be something that is anti-national, that Canada can stand in the way of that story. And that's really resonated with me because it's a space for us as writers to navigate our identities when we come together on the page. But also we have to understand that we are still navigating the colonization system that we live in. And that by itself impacts our day-to-day life. It doesn't only impact our art, it doesn't only impact who we are, and it also impacts what stories get to be told and what stories do not. So today, as I do this land acknowledgement, I invite you to consider the impact of colonization on your own life and to consider your storytelling, what you do for a living, as a way to resist that impact. Now that we have done this, I'm looking forward to introduce you to the one and only Kai Cheng Thom. Kai Cheng Thom is a writer, a performer, a somatic healer, a wicked witch, and a lasagna lover based in Tkaronto. She's the author of several award-winning books, including the essay collection, I Hope We Choose Love, which I'm in love with, the children's book, From the Stars to the Sky to the Fish in the Sea, and the novel, Fierce Femmes and Notorious Liars, A Dangerous Transgirl's Confabulous Memoir. Hi, Kai. I think you can't unmute yourself. I have to unmute you. Here we go. Hi. I'm sorry. It's to make sure that that our conversation remains private.
Totally. I was like, maybe it's like a silent conversation, like performance art. Like, what am I saying by saying nothing? So this is so great. But I'm happy to talk to you. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. What an honor to be conversing with you, Danny, and to see all these lovely people who are joining us today too.
Oh, thank you very much. I am truly, truly thankful that you accepted my invitation. I have been blessed, to be honest, that a lot of folks in the Canadian literature scene, when I say, hey, I want to do this crazy little thing, they'll be like, yeah, cool, awesome, we'll do it. So I'm so thankful that I have you as a friend. I'm so thankful that I have you as a supporter. But Kai, I have been wondering, which is
Mhm.
so cheesy of me to say,
No, I
in,
love it.
in
What are you wondering?
I've been wondering about safety.
Aren't we
We are,
all?
hmm?
Aren't we all?
Aren't we all? We live in this world where our identities themselves are considered an attack on the mainstream, where millionaire authors are using their transphobia as a way and painting people like trans folks as unsafe in what seems to be like an elaborate marketing scheme for their next book. So I'm wondering, safety is this obsession that we have as queer and trans folks, this concept that we need to create safer spaces for ourselves, and that we need to protect those spaces furiously and sometimes even violently. But how do we navigate those communities? How do navigate those needs for safety while also navigating the fact that our identities are being painted unsafe? And where do we find the strength to build a community that sees us as safe while also facing off those who are forcing us into a narrative of unsafety?
Uh, you know, this question is speaking to my heart. This is like my whole obsession right now and always, Danny. Thank you. Like, this question is so like curated and intelligent. And like, I want to dive in. Okay, so I want to start by saying like a challenging thing, maybe, which is that I believe, and this comes from like reading other people, it's not my idea, right? That safety is actually a function of power. And I
Mm,
don't think we often think about it this way, right? Like, I think we're like, oh, safety, like this lovely thing, a human right, we have to be safe or safer. But safety is a function of power,
mhm,
at
mhm,
least through one lens. And by that, I mean um, safety is achieved through, usually through power, not always, and I'll talk about that in a second. But usually it's like, especially in a world that is like viewed through a lens of conflict or through a lens of safety as a scarce resource, we
mhm,
achieve it through violence, much in the same way that we achieve material resources like land or like food or oil, or even sometimes intangible resources like attention or money, which is like tangible but intangible at the same time, social credit, right? Social capital. We achieve them through violence a lot of the time, right? In a capitalist world, we achieve these things through violence. And the same is true of safety, but because safety has this kind of fuzzy halo around it sometimes, I think we overlook the power function. And that's really key because, of course, if we start to look at it through a lens of like power analysis or a supremacy analysis, right? Who gets to be safe? Well, we know that usually it's heterosexual, white, cisgendered people. That comes as no surprise to those of us who think critically. But I'm really glad you mentioned that piece about queer community too, right? Because especially in the 90s and earlier thousands, and still now, it's like, is this a safe space? Is this a safer space for queers? Is this safer queer sex we're having? Is it safe, 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 safe? And that's great. It comes from a really potent place of like recognizing we have the right to safety. But we often forget, I think, to be like, how are we achieving this safety through power? And how might that power be then affecting other people who are
mm,
being erased? And I think that's like, it's really intense. And when I think about like, oh, so the queer community center near where I live on Church and Wellesley, right? So I live near all the queer things here.
you're the heart of the village.
Downtown queer things anyway. It's very, yeah, anyway, that's a whole supremacy on its own, like downtown supremacy. But like like just like, so why is it that like white gays and lesbians who have nuclear families might feel safer walking into a queer community center and not, for example, homeless trans youth or sex worker trans women of color, right? Who does security get deployed against?
Mhm,
Who do we
mhm,
ask to be removed in the name of safety?
yeah,
Who do we ask to be double checked in the name of safety?
mhm,
Who do we say your language is wrong, so you have to stop talking in the name of safety? And like, of course, privileged white middle class people and those who are adjacent, have the ability to kind of use language and their own power to signal, oh, I'm safe, so I don't have to be um, investigated or seen as suspicious. But many of us do not. And I think there's so much more to say. Like I think, but I think I'll say just one more piece, which is that I think I wonder what would happen if we try to reconstruct safety not as a function of power, but as a
Mm-hmm.
function of care, right? Like, what
Mm-hmm.
if we were like, I don't make myself safe by bombing these other people so they can't launch rockets at me. I don't
Mm-hmm.
make myself safe by kicking people out of my community, but I make myself safe by extending a hand, trusting my power, and saying, how can we make this work? And obviously, in situations where power is really imbalanced, that's not going to work. But
Mm-hmm.
then that's maybe where we need the rest of the world, right, to step in and say, how can the greater function of community caring build a love based version of safety? But I want to turn it over to you too, because I want to ask if it's appropriate, like, if it feels okay. Like, so, you've spoken about your experience as a racialized man in
Mm-hmm.
Canada, as someone who is from Syria, as someone who is of refugee experience. And so I know that you must have been marked as an unsafe person at some point in your life. And I wonder if that has brought up, analysis that you want to share too.
Well, firstly, oh my God, you are capable of providing so much insight in such concise way. I'm living for that. I would say like personally from a personal experience to avoid going into representation of all Syrians and representation of all refugees and representation of
Mm,
all queer men. Um, I would say from a personal experience, I'm obsessed with safety. It's like a disease. It's like an addiction. It
mm,
feels so embedded in me that I need to feel safe in the
mm-hmm,
communities that I'm navigating, and that's impossible. There's no way for me to be absolutely safe at absolutely all the time.
mm-hmm,
And it was born because of my experiences growing up in the Middle East, where as a queer man who is clearly queer,
mm-hmm.
I was such a twink. Oh my God.
Yeah, girl.
So that also created this fear in me that I'm always not safe. And God knows that fear has manifested itself in real life. I was kicked out of jobs. I was gay bashed when I was in Egypt. I had experiences where I lost that sense of safety. And then I think that the biggest challenge when I'm here on this side of the word, is that I don't think of safety as fluid anymore. It's very
Mm,
rigid. It's very based in needs for what is my surrounding, what is the people around me are thinking of. And yes, I agree. Like there is a narrative out there as a racialized man walking in the street on Davis Street, and a police car would stop for no apparent reason, just like
mm.
slowly drive next to me, and you're like, okay, it's 2 o'clock in the morning and I'm kind of drunk, but I highly doubt that I'm causing any disturbance at the moment. I'm just walking home. So there is definitely this sense that I'm projecting an image of unsafe for others, but at the same time I cannot project that image that I am safe to myself. Like look at me, I'm big, muscular, I'm a
Yeah,
man
girl.
of work. I know, right? um
I've seen
I,
I've seen those selfies, the gym selfies. I know you have muscles.
I can show them too, I tell you. uh,
Welcome to the gun show.
Boom. I I call this one Brenda. No, I'm
Oh,
joking.
hello.
um so no, like I think that there is a moment where I have to like navigate within myself this need for safety, because I don't think that I need that the sense of safety that I think I do. I think when I navigate the world as a man of privilege, as a man of certain class right now, like I definitely did some major jumps in my class, in the class hierarchy. Certain man with a certain name to myself. I feel like I have a lot of safety that is created for me, but I don't seem to connect yet within myself that that safety is enough. I
Mm,
need to always be safer, if that makes
mm,
sense.
mhm. Wow, I love that, Danny, because it's so, like, I think what you're sharing with us is like really smart and really authentic. Like I would even almost say vulnerable. Like this like safety as in addiction, I think was your word, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
is something I'm noticing too in myself, and I think a lot of queers. And I don't want to stigmatize that.
Mm-hmm.
Like you've lived through real danger. I think maybe like repeatedly, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
And you know, I would never like. I don't think my experience of unsafety comes close to yours. I too, though, have lived through repeated danger. Very different situations, but like yeah, like physically, like I could be killed, danger. And then
Mhm.
also just like I could be canceled, danger.
Oh my God, yes. Oh my God.
But here's the thing: is you know when I was working as a therapist, I don't do that anymore. But when I was, almost every queer person, and all my clients were queer, would come in and say the same thing. I never feel safe. I never feel safe. And, you know, they lived through real danger, but also I'd be like, okay, what about this moment? It's just you and me.
Mhm.
We're in like a room where like, you know, there's no one else here, but there's like lots of professionals around. You know, what could we do? What would make it safer? And we would go through this conversation. You know, we could replace all the therapists with people of color. We could, you know, make it like an anti-capitalist, whatever kind of society. We
Mhm.
could, you know, eat all the billionaires. Would that make you feel safe? Just as a thought experiment. And
Mhm.
the answer was sometimes yes, not gonna lie. But sometimes it was also no. And I'd be like, so why no? And the answer would be like, oh, because those are outside things. And outside is unsafe, but also unsafe is inside me.
Mhm. Mhm.
Inside me, the
Mhm.
landscape is unsafe because,
Wow.
you know, I was made by unsafety. You know, my parents, my, you know, my home, the streets, the school, you
Mhm.
know, our insides are created by the external world to a large extent, and that external world was unsafe, so the internal world is unsafe. And
Mhm.
so this becomes this interesting question then, if we're like, well, I can never be safe enough, which means that I have to, you know, we want to reshape the external world, which is fine.
Mhm.
When does it happen that like my safety needs come into conflict with someone else's safety needs, and then what do we do? And I don't know the answer to that question, but it like haunts me because I'm a nerd. I'm like, I lie awake being like, what happens when two people's safety needs are different?
Well, that's actually jumping on that point quickly because I also want to hear you read. Jumping on that point, you said at the beginning you compared my experience and what it means for me to be in dangerous situations to your experience and what it means for you to be in dangerous situations. And I don't think they're comparable to begin with. I don't
Mm,
think that there's a way to, I don't know, statistically compare the experiences of two different peoples and their sense of danger and
mm,
what that danger impacted them and created within them, as you were saying. Um, a big challenge I find sometimes, like even in my relationship, is that my husband would be like, I don't know, complaining about his day or complaining about like a childhood experience that he had or something like that. And then he's like, oh, but it compares none to your own experiences. I'm like, no, but that is where you are vulnerable. That is what hurts you. That is the wound that you live with, I would say.
mm.
And that by itself is not comparable. There's no way for me um, to imagine myself or to live through the experiences that cause you to feel unsafe while also create your unique brand of resilience that turned you into the adult mature person that you are at the moment.
I mean, like mature.
I mean, have you met me? I just talked about Brenda. I'm not sure. All right, all right, all right. This is a perfect gateway for you to tell us something from your writing. I hear that you're preparing something from Fierce Femmes and
Yes,
Flyers.
yes.
So please and thank you. Let's start with you reading. And
Oh my
folks,
God, thank you.
while Kai is reading, if you feel like clapping, just like write it down. If you have questions, if something stood up for you and moved you, please let us know. And off with Kai.
Thanks so much, Danny. So this is a chapter from Fierce Femmes and Notorious Liars. It's just like it's like 1.5 pages. Um, But yeah, so it's from Fierce Femmes, Notorious Liars, A Dangerous Trans Girl's Confabulous Memoir. Because everybody gets confused, I have to tell you this book is not my memoir. It is not a memoir at all. It is a novel, but I made it confusing because there's memoir in the title. I realize this now. It didn't occur to me before. So this is my novel, and because we're talking about safety and danger, I thought I would read this chapter, which is called How to Kill a Man with Your Bare Hands. The main character is sitting on a bus. She's from a city called Gloom, where it is always raining. And she's moving to a city called the City of Smoke and Lights, where everyone smokes and speaks French. Anyway, there's a man on this bus who keeps looking at me like I'm a piece of meat. He's got a shaved head and a bunch of bicep tattoos. And I can tell he thinks he's hot stuff. He won't stop turning around to stare at me with this vaguely menacing look like he's considering eating me. I'm wearing my black boots, a black miniskirt, and a lacy black top. Most of the 10 or other so passengers haven't even given me a second glance, but I know this guy can tell I'm trans. Trans and traveling alone on a bus in the middle of nowhere at 3 a.m. When the bus pulls over for a 2-hour break, I get out to stretch my legs. The stop is basically a gigantic 24-hour gas station on the side of the highway. I buy a pack of cigarettes and then walk around the perimeter of the building and light up, enjoying the taste of tobacco and battery acid and dishwashing detergent, whatever the fuck else it is they put in smokes. And I can hear the crunch of the guy's boots behind me as I round the corner and come to the rest stop. I keep walking until I am 20 steps outside the circle of lights that surround the stop. He still finds me. I stand there smoking, my cigarette perched delicately between 2 fingers. I pretend I'm Audrey Hepburn in Breakfast at Tiffany's. Delicate, helpless, demure. Hey, the guy says. I turn to look at him. Hey, you want to have a good time? He says, his eyes shiny. No thanks, I say quietly. I always get really quiet in moments like this. My muscles are trembling, already flooded with anticipation and excitement. Oh, come on, he says. I think we're going to have a good time. And he wraps his big, meaty fingers around my wrist. I jab the cigarette into his bare forearm. He yelps and lets me go. I rear back and bring my foot up, kicking hard in the praying mantis style. He hunches instinctively to protect his crotch, but I'm actually aiming higher than that, and my kick catches him directly in the bottom left rib. I hear the bone crack, and the man wails in pain and surprise. The sound is musical to me, and I let out a whoop as I whip my fist up and around in a leopard's paw knuckle punch, breaking his nose and sending a spurt of blood into the air. A few drops hit my face, and I lose it then, abandoning myself to the dance of feet and fists until the man is curled up on the ground at my mercy. I pull myself back from the edge of animal fury, just in time to stop myself from caving in his windpipe with my heel. I stand over his writhing body, breathing deeply. You're right, I say to him. That was a good time.
Wow. Also, hey. I love your reading. I love your style of reading. That was a lot of people are clapping. That was fun. What a reading. That was awesome. Folks are living for it. And of course they do. I remember a couple of years ago, I invited you to come to the Night of Storytelling here in Vancouver.
Oh, so much fun.
Oh my God, it was so much fun. And then you stood there and you're like, I'm going to start with a poem. And then you started singing. And that was a moment. That was a moment I was living. And I think Amber Dawn was in the audience, and Amber Dawn was also living. Just sitting there, you're like, yeah.
Oh, Amber Dawn, beloved friend.
Oh, I love Amber Dawn. I love Amber Dawn so freaking much. All right. So that introduction that you did takes me right into the first question that I have for you.
Amazing.
So, and again, folks who are watching, I see you. If you have questions for Kai, this is your time. Shoot them my way, and I will ask them. Also, if you have comments, or you just want to tell us that we're handsome and beautiful and everything in between. Anything, yes, please. And if you want to say hi to Brenda. I guess Brenda's now co-hosting this show. Um,
Hi, Brenda.
in your introduction, you said that the Fierce Femmes is not a memoir, and that it is a novel. It's a work of fiction. And um, I was interested in that, to be honest. And I was thinking about this regarding fiction because I'm interested in writing fiction way more than I'm interested in writing memoir. Still, for us racialized folks, for us who come with marginalized identities, it seems that the publishing world is dying for our trauma. They're seeking our trauma from, and they're wanting those memoirs, those nonfiction narratives. And then why did you decide to go the fiction route instead of the memoir one? Wouldn't it have been, I don't know, quote unquote, easier to go that way?
Hmm. Oh, these intelligent, burning questions. Right to my soul, Danny Ramadan. Do you know how rare it is to get asked such good questions? Like, well, you do know. I just mean, like, audience. Do you know it is impossible to get asked these questions? You know, the last time I talked about fierce femmes, it was like I was invited to a panel with like two other women who had written real memoirs, and then they were like, "This is life writing." I was like, "You didn't even read this book. You think that I live a life where there are mermaids?" I mean, like I do, but not literally.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, I mean, so it was such. I love this question because I'm dying to tell people it was an intentional choice that I
Mhm,
decided to go the novel route and not the memoir route, and it was intentional that I decided to make my novel in the shape of a fictional memoir
mhm,
because I wanted to do two things. One was to break free of the imperative to write from my life trauma, and to be like, here's the tell all about my genitals, all about my parents, blah blah
mhm,
blah.
mhm, mhm,
That was one. I wanted to break that. But two, I wanted to honor that for I think 60 years of trans women writing and publishing in the Western canon, at least. Um, those books were almost all memoirs,
mhm,
right? And
mhm,
I didn't want to say that there was no value to that because there obviously was.
mhm,
Um, and I wanted to play with the memoir genre that like really like was like I get why this is important and I get how I'm shaped by it, and
mhm,
also that gave it magic, right? Like, okay, so yes, my book is like about a girl who moves from a city where it always rains to a city where people always smoke. I did that.
mhm.
You know, yes, it's about a Chinese girl. I am Chinese. Yes, it's about a deadly kung fu artist who can kill you with her bare hands. I mean, you know, try it
I
and
know that
see.
for a fact. Yeah.
But like I wanted it also to be full of um like miracles, and there's a place in my book called the Street of Miracles where she goes to live, and I wanted to show that that was possible too, um in a way that also like was able to weave in my real pain and my real
Mhm,
joy, um that I wanted to have it all. I wanted to show that we could have it all,
mhm,
fact and fiction, and the gifts of both.
mhm,
And I wanted this book to be really fucking fun to read. I wanted
mhm.
trans girls to read it and be like, "That's badass," but also be like, "Yeah, I mean, there's some real shit in there." So, thank you so much. Like that's why.
Mm-hmm. And I appreciate that you pointed out the question. Firstly, to be honest, like I want to thank you because we have been having a conversation about this for a month now, about this meeting of ours.
Mm,
And a lot of those questions streamed from the beautiful conversation back and forth between the two of us. So thank you very much for participating and creating those questions.
anytime.
Um, I I was just on an interview, and the interviewer out of nowhere, firstly the interview was supposed to be about my novel the Clothesline Swing, and then the interviewer out of nowhere brought up Salma the Syrian Chef, my children's book, and I was like taken off guard, and I was like, okay. And then she's like, yeah, but like as a refugee, don't you think that Damascus was cruel to you? I'm like,
Whoa.
This is an afternoon show, and I don't have enough wine in my system yet to
Bitch,
talk
get me
about this.
drunk first.
I don't think my husband gets to ask me those kind of questions. So, um, so they go intimate and they go. It feels sometimes that there's curiosity out there, and that curiosity in a way justifies the need for the nonfiction narrative,
Mm,
in a way that I'm just curious about knowing your experience, which translates, to be honest, I put it in Google Translate for white people, and it turns out that it is, I want to see your trauma on a stage. And it feels, it feels quite challenging at times, because it feels like I I want to write a novel that is meaningful. I wrote the Coastline Swing about Syrian refugees. My next novel, The Foghorn Echoes, is about Syrian queer refugees. But I also don't want to be pigeonholed in that. I also would like to write a superhero YA novel.
yes.
I would love to write that one day. Um, so so it just feels like when I'm writing my memoir, and I will write a memoir one day. That's what the market needs. That's what I would like to do with one day. I think the thing that I want to bring to it is agency. I want to
Mm,
write this memoir with agency. I want to be the person who's making the decisions of what to reveal and what to keep to myself.
I love that. I love that. And I guess, I don't know, like my question for you is like, like an existential question. Is it possible, or like, how is it possible? How can we meet the demand of the market, but still be free to tell the story that we want to tell? Like,
Mm,
you
mm,
know, when you write your memoir, of course, you'll do it with skill and grace,
mhm,
and talent, but like, how do you avoid the feeling of like, I feel like I'm being eaten all the
mhm,
time,
mhm,
you know, like anytime, like I've started to ignore interview requests, you know, unless they're from my friends. I've started to ignore invitations to do stuff, like because I feel like I'm being swallowed. And I wonder, you know, how do you give them what they want without giving away yourself?
I think, Kai, I'm one hell of an amazing writer.
Yes.
My metaphors are fantastic. My writing is engaging. My similes makes you cry. There is beauty and poetry to the way that I write. I'm a great writer.
Mm,
But for me to be acknowledged and taken into account in Canlit, I have to navigate the needs of the market of Canlit. I have to navigate what it means to be part of Canlit. And does it justify it for me right now to navigate that while also holding on to my identity? Does it justify all the hard work to create that balance? It does for now, but I don't know about tomorrow. I don't know if in a week from now I'll be able to justify it. But
mm,
for now, to be honest, I think I deserve that spotlight. I think I deserve to be well known, because my writing truly is, and I'm going to sound so fucking cocky, my
no, say it.
writing is changing lives as we
Hmm.
speak. People
Hmm.
have got in touch with me, talked to me about my writing, and it's meaningful to those folks. And
Of
it's
course.
meaningful to me to push it forward that way. So if I have to navigate the difficult Canadian literature scene, I will navigate the difficult Canadian literature scene.
I love that. I mean, I'm going to read that book, all the books,
I
because
promise
you
you,
are
it's a good
fucking
book.
good.
I have a couple of questions for you from folks. I see a question from Lan, and they're saying, "Well, thank you for your reading. I'm having so many feelings. I have a curiosity. When you spoke earlier about folks' safety needs clashing, and it keeps about folks' safety needs clashing, and it keeping you up at night. Oh, different people having different needs of safety and
Mhm.
clashing, and that keeps you up at night. I'm wondering if you would offer a hypothetical scenario of what you think of those needs and how they clash.
Oh, yeah. Well, Sure. I mean, so I'm a community organizer. I say that with laughing because I'm like, am I? I do a lot of organizing, but I don't know if I ever do it well.
Mm,
And I, run a lot of groups for work. I have run, yeah, I'm a teacher, so I do a lot of work in the community. So, of course, if folks have been to workshops in the queer or like in the QT BIPOC community, then often what we do is we'll start with like, here are the guidelines, and we'll make
mm,
safety guidelines, right?
mm, mm,
And so a very, superficial example that almost always comes up for me when I'm working, especially with very traumatized folks, which is, to be real, lots of folks in my community,
mm,
is like folks will say, well, to be safe, I need um, I need to be able to be forgiven for mistakes. Pretty reasonable, right?
yeah.
But then someone will say, I can't forgive every mistake
Mhm,
because I already live in a world where actually people are saying, forgive me all the time.
mhm,
People are
mhm,
forcing me to forgive their whiteness, their microaggressions, the
mhm,
misgendering, et cetera, et cetera. So actually, maybe it's your responsibility to
mhm, mhm,
step up and like not make mistakes. And if you're going to make them, hold yourself accountable.
mhm,
Um,
mhm,
and
mhm.
sometimes this is very at odds because then people get triggered, right? People will be like, well, I don't feel safe to share. I can't talk to you. So that's a superficial example. I think an
I
intense
don't think it is
example is
superficial.
like, so this comes from actually, this is going to be controversial as I say it, and it's getting recorded. This comes from Sarah Schulman's book, Conflict is Not Abuse.
Mhm,
You can have your opinions about this book. I personally think it has some really great ideas, and I also want to challenge parts of it. Um, so one of her great examples is around safer sex or the concept of safer sex and folks who are seropositive, which means like HIV positive.
mhm,
Um,
mhm.
so it is enshrined in Canadian law and in the law of many countries
Yeah.
that it is considered a deadly sexual assault to
Mhm,
have sex with someone if you are HIV positive without disclosing. Um,
mhm,
but what we know about forced disclosure is that it actually causes people to get tested less because then they're like, well, I'm not going to get tested, so I won't know, and then I
mhm,
won't have this extra restriction on my sex life that will cause me to be stigmatized forever.
mhm.
People also really truly and like they fear like being attacked, like they fear being violently attacked in their sex lives by their partners if they disclose, and they fear being treated cruelly.
Mhm.
So this mandated disclosure is like it comes from actually like a conservative place, predominantly within the gay male community, right?
Mhm.
Saying other gay men are dangerous to me and they
Mhm.
should be forced to disclose because I don't consent to having sex. Even if the viral load is undetectable, even
Yeah.
if there is a condom, I still don't, people should be forced to disclose. And of course, folks who are HIV positive are saying, well, lots say, not everyone, of course, will say, well, that is a violation of my privacy. And actually,
Mhm.
people who are in the most danger are people who are seropositive.
Mhm.
So this is a very important example. Another important example, which will be the last one, I think, is similarly trans women. So,
Mhm.
and having sex. So a lot of folks will say, and this was a defense used in court to get people off for murdering trans women,
Mhm.
that, it's considered like a vicious assault to not disclose to someone that you're trans
Yeah.
if you have sex with them. And for many years, men would find out somehow and they'd murder trans women and they would say, well, I felt like my safety was in true danger, so I murdered this trans woman. And that is the kind of thing that can happen when our safety politics get focused so much on self that we
Mhm.
fail to see the other. When
Mhm.
our safety politics are so focused on our feeling of helplessness that
Mhm.
we fail to see the power we hold over people who are also marginalized or more marginalized in our
Mhm.
society.
Mhm. I wow. I feel like we can talk about safety and we can talk um about this for hours, to be honest. And I actually have multiple questions around the same tone and around the same topic. Manj, for example, a friend of mine, is asking multiple questions as well. But I feel like I want to move away from this because that will literally take us 6 hours
There
to
are
hack
whole books written
whole
about
books
this.
about this. Yes. So maybe at the end of at the end of the event, if you'd like to recommend the book, or right now, if you'd like to recommend the book to to read about this, it's up to you, but we can then move on to other questions.
Yeah, well, there's some really, I think more than books, I would say to look into legal history, and this can be found on Wikipedia, so it's not hard to like the information is often digestible.
Mhm.
To look into the history of like criminalization of HIV positive people. So the Google search term would be criminalization of HIV positive people,
Yeah.
and to look into the gay panic defense.
Mhm.
Which is what is used to justify the murder of trans women,
Yeah.
also the murder of gay men,
Yeah.
incidentally, um, because there's a deep history there about safety. And then I guess a counterpoint also is actually to look into the history of men of color, particularly Black men,
Mhm.
um, experiencing violence and murder because of the supposed threat that they pose to white women.
Mhm.
Which, by the way, that legacy extends to today. It is largely why we're seeing the need for the movement Black Lives Matter and not another Black life now, because certain bodies are considered dangerous. So I would just consider, because if you Google that, you're going to get tons of stuff, and it's a deep rabbit hole. And I encourage you to dive in.
All right, awesome. And I want to go back to your book. I want to go back to Fierce Femmes. Mhm. So I have my questions written down here just to make sure that people know why I'm looking down. I'm looking like an idiot, but I don't want. I worked really hard on those questions. So when you think of Fierce Femmes and Notorious Liars, what is it about you as an author, and what is it about the book itself for you as an author? And did it start as one thing and then you wrote it and then it became something else? And also, so basically I want to know the relationship between the book and yourself as an author, the relationship between you and how the book was written, and the relationship between the way the book changed after it was read by the community and it returned to you, it echoed back to you from the community.
Wow, what what a freaking amazing question. You're good at this.
Yeah, I should be paid.
You should be paid all the money all the
Thank
time,
you.
Danny. So yeah, I mean, this book is my second book. I wrote it in a fit of rage after my first book was rejected, actually. My first book is my book of poetry, which was published second, but I wrote it first. And so, yeah, Fierce Femmes. It's funny because I've written all my books are in different genres so far, like poetry, novel, picture book, and essays, like nonfiction.
Yeah.
And each has like a separate following, like overlapping but separate following, which is very funny. But I would say Fierce Femmes was the closest to my heart when I wrote it at the time. Like
Mm.
sometimes, okay, here's my moment of sounding cocky. Sometimes I read this baby and I'm like, I'm smart. That girl is smart.
Yes, you
I was like, I
are.
can't write this. I couldn't do this again, you know.
Uh,
So it was my love song and my hate song and my just like this was all of my teen angst and my like pain of growing up in
mhm.
this one book. Um, and then when it went into the community, um, actually I love this question because it was very painful.
Oh.
The book did well. Like I have an amazing publisher for this book, Metonymy Press.
Mhm.
They are like a very small but mighty, mighty press in Montreal, and they all their books are like award winning by like racialized trans people. Like
Amazing.
it's amazing. You should check them out for sure and support them. And like this book like became my like popular book for a long time. My children's book is now I think the bigger seller, but this was my popular book, the book that made like trans youth be like, oh, Kai Cheng Thom, I know who she is.
Mhm.
And that was actually really hard because I didn't think that I would live past 25. So I was like, I'm just gonna write this book and then die. But then I lived, and I didn't know that people would be like, "Oh, your book sets an example for me." Like people, reach out to me some like a lot, like a lot of people write me emails and stuff, and they're like, "This book is my example," or "I learned from this," or I want to know how this happened. And there's just something so painful for me about knowing that trans girls' experiences often haven't changed, or like they're not different from like when I was 17,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so I'm happy that people connect. I'm so grateful people are reading. And I also am like, oh no, like there's a part of me that says, I wish I could have just written a book that was like being a trans girl, becoming the prom queen,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
But I wrote a book about murdering cops and having sex with ghosts,
Mm-hmm.
um, and leaving your boyfriend. And I don't know, that opens up something painful in me and beautiful.
Mm.
So yeah, that's my answer.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate the empathy that you're putting into that. I think I think there is something beautiful in navigating that trauma and even putting it on the page, and maybe the community might come back and be like, I wish for a prom queen trans girl novel, and that novel should exist. It seems like a beautiful idea for a novel, and they
Oh,
should
for
make a
sure.
movie out of it, and you should write the script for the movie and make all the money. um,
Yes.
but what I think is that for me, I wrote a book that is full of trauma. I wrote The Clothesline Swing. It is page to page traumatic.
Mm.
But at the same time, I think that a lot of people are reading resilience into it, are reading um, their ability to see past the trauma and see into the person. And I think that that's what matters quite a lot. I think um, it makes sense that the impact of the echo of the community into the book would impact you this way, would vibrate within you this way. But I would say maybe also allow that resilience to come across, because it feels quite genuine. And the writing that we do, the writing that we as marginalized folks do, it it doesn't come across, it comes across as genuine to other folks who are marginalized. Like they
Hmm.
read it that way because they know that when we write, every word is empathetic. When we write, even when we write the difficult stuff, everything is
Oh, you're so wise, Danny.
empathetic. Beyond my ears.
You
Um,
have brains and muscles.
you should tell that to my husband. He should appreciate me more. Mm.
Husband, he has brain and muscles.
All right, we have 10 more minutes and I have like five more questions for you, but I want to hear you read one more time. So give us a short reading and then we finish with one last question. How about that?
Beautiful. Thank you,
Awesome,
Danny.
awesome.
Okay.
Again,
I was
YouTube.
going to read something really traumatic, but I'm actually going to read something not that. I'm going to read a different thing. Um, okay. So this is near the end of the book, and our heroine has like lived through some serious fights, and she's trying to figure out her life, and she's talking to her older sister, like not her biological older sister, but her trans older sister. Um, and she's okay. So she's trying to decide whether or not she should move in with her rich white trans guy boyfriend and like become a housewife essentially. Um, so now I guess I'm going to move in with him, with Josh. And he keeps on saying I should think about auditing classes at the university, and probably I could get a scholarship and become a great writer with my gift for storytelling. And then I'll get published and become a super famous transgender writer and have get married, and we'll be a transgender power couple and have transgender children and raise them on a cloud of transgender happiness. TM. And the thing is, I want that. I want it so bad. So bad, I want to put it on a plate and stab it with a fork and stuff it in my mouth and down my throat till I hit that place deep inside that has never, ever been full. So I turn to Kamaya and say, Kamaya, What is the difference between hunger and love? She takes my hand in hers. Maybe someday I'll play mother to 100 trans girls of my own. Darling, she says quietly, you are going to do a lot of things in your life, a lot of things you never thought you could. Just like every femme in the world, you have that gift. But you don't have to do anything you don't want to. But how can I know what I want? I say, choking a bit because it hurts that she believes so much in me, my goodness, my potential, and I still don't, can't, won't. Every time I want something, I hurt somebody, I say. So quietly it comes out like a tiny thread of smoke between my lips. Kimaya still hears me, sees me. Honey, you hurt yourself, she says, because everybody around you hurts people and is hurting. And that is just the story you were given. You can't get stuck in that. Don't get stuck in any one story, not even your own. That's the difference between love and hunger, she says. Hunger is a story you get stuck in. Love is the story that takes you somewhere new.
I mean, it's just beautiful, just stunning wording. The way that you deliver your reading is just intense, and that mix between moving into humor and then like waving back like a sea into intentional intimacy. Just it feels so beautiful. So thank you so much for that reading.
Thanks, Danny.
Mm. People say, "Wow, chills, so beautiful. I have melted into a puddle." Some
Yeah, puddles.
Alexa says, "I have melted into a puddle." Alexa, maybe we should call a doctor. No, okay. Megan says, "Gorgeous. People are in love." I expected nothing less from Kai Cheng Thom. I
Hmm.
have one last question for you because we have 6 minutes. Yay. So, how intentional was the engagement of this book with your real world? What place do you think a work of fiction holds in the real world that we live in right now? Hashtag 2020 sucks.
Hashtag 2020. Another perfect question. Here's my answer. I so the title of the book is Fierce Femmes and Notorious Liars.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and people like there's not actually that much lying in the book. People are like, what's the lying part about? The character is like a pathological liar, but we don't see her do it that much.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, why? And people are like, why? Or well, in my head, the audience is like, why? And I'm like, well, when I was a teenager, I was a pathological liar, and I didn't know why the lies came out compulsively. Now I'm like like I can't not tell lies. Like it's actually a problem because I like went so hard in the other direction. Um, but I think about that, and I when I was a counselor, I also then worked with youth who were compulsive liars. And the thing you need to know about compulsive lying is it comes half from a place of intention, half from a place of true compulsion, like we don't know why. Um, but of course, there's a reason, usually a protective function, even if that protection is weird and illogical. Like it's an internal logic. And when I thought about it really hard, and then I think about how everyone calls fiction writers liars, but we're not, and how everyone calls survivors liars, but we're not, just because survivors sometimes remember things in a blurry way, or everyone calls asylum seekers liars, just because the narrative of unsafety in the country of origin doesn't seem to line up to the judge.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized sometimes what we're trying to express, humans, artists, liars, is a truth of the heart, an emotional truth, an inside truth that um, doesn't always correspond to like the hard logic of the external camera of like the robot view. Um, and this is why, if I write, I still write, or why I'm interested in other people, or what I think we're trying to do in 2020 is figure out like, what is the truth? Not the truth, of the colonizer
Mm-hmm.
or of the robot. Like, what is the truth of the heart?
Mm-hmm. I I I can't follow up with that. It's just to yeah. I I used to lie when I was much younger, and I used to say that my mother is dead,
Mm,
and it makes no sense. Like I was living outside of Syria. I was living in Egypt at the time, and I was telling people and lovers and boyfriends that my mother is dead. And it has something to do with my relationship with my mother and the way that my mother rejected me and the
mm,
way that my mother had her own demons to handle and her own issues, mental health issues to deal with. And did it feel, just to refer back to safety, did it feel safer to say that lie?
mm,
100%. Did it feel when I in 2011 I sat down with myself and I started seeing like an online therapist, and then when I came here to Canada I went into like full on obsession with therapy for a couple of years,
yeah.
and I I broke away from that lie. And did it feel so much more challenging to break away from the lie? Yes. Did the lie feel easier? 100%. Um, and it feels that the reason why somebody would need that space is also that layer of safety, that layer of safety even within yourself, I feel.
Mhm,
Yeah, yeah.
mhm.
Anyway, I feel, oh God, that was really vulnerable and completely unscripted. Yay! I love those
Danny,
moments.
thank you. You're beautiful and we love you.
Thank you, Kai. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. Kai Cheng Thom was my guest for today, and I have been wondering. It has been an amazing 2 episodes so far. Last time we did the conversation with Joshua Whitehead. The conversation is now on YouTube. If you missed it, it has been amazing, and I spent an hour flirting with Joshua Whitehead. I
He's
mean,
pretty flirtable.
oh my God, he's so freaking cute. I spent the whole hour just flirting. And today's conversation was with Kai Cheng Thom, and it went deep and it was cutting and wounding, but still it was healing and wonderful and embracing. So thank you so much, Kai. I really, really, really appreciate you being here today with us.
It's my honor and my pleasure. Thank you, Danny.
Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. Next month, I have the one and only Janie Chang, who is joining me from here from Vancouver. If you don't know who Janie Chang, how dare you? She's actually with us right here in this conversation. She has been with us throughout the hour. Jenny Cheng is the best-selling author of Dragon Springs Road. Her latest book, The Library of Legends, is on my Kindle, so it makes no sense to hold it in my hand. But I am truly looking forward to that moment of talking to Jenny. Jenny has been embracing and loving and the best, one of my best friends here in Vancouver. She came to my wedding as well, so I'm truly looking forward to exploring that friendship with Janie in front of 30 people or more. Buy your tickets today, and thank you again to Kai, and thank you to everybody for coming and for commenting. I'm really, really thankful. Yay!
Thanks, everybody.
All right,
Yay.
all right. See you, folks. See you. Bye, bye. Bye, Kai. It was lovely.
Love you, Danny.
Bye, bye.